on knowledge-intensive activities that contribute to a rapid pace of advancement in technical and scientific innovation, as well as accelerated obsolescence, of course. Sources of knowledge, such as human expertise and trade secrets, are crucial factors in the economic growth of a country. Examples of knowledge economy activities include research, technical support, and consulting. The proportion given over by countries to agriculture, manufacturing, or service-based economies will determine their relative wealth. Developed nations are now fueled by knowledge and brain power. Attracting inward investment can be a challenge. The overall role of the private sector in development in terms of both local and international private sector activities, including foreign investment, is to generate wealth and stimulate economic growth. There are opportunities for investors. However, attracting them does require a favorable investment climate. And of course, as alluded to earlier, private sector participation may be a partial solution to the pressing needs for large-scale capital investment, allowing government to free resources for other important sectors. But where public investment may be required alone or in support of private investment, an evaluation of the prospective returns should be a prerequisite before any investment is made. Private investment may require tailored policies to protect intellectual property rights and overcome domestic imperfections that hinder the smooth integration of indigenous and foreign firms into worldwide supply chains. This is where government needs to step in, as happened in South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, all incidentally featuring in the top 35 trading nations with the UK, with Singapore ranked second in the world Ease of Doing Business Index, Korea 5th, and Taiwan 15th, and all three very low on the World Corruption Index. If they have not already, governments need to set up an investment promotion agency, decide in advance what sectors' activities should be targeted, ensure the infrastructure is in place for them and their planned activities, and aim to facilitate domestic supplier linkages in support of foreign entrants. This should all be part of a strategy to create quality foreign direct investment, facilitating the transfer of technology, knowledge, and know-how. Of course, this is nothing new to Botswana. As noted by the Quantum Global Research Lab back in 2016, its strategic location, skilled workforce, and a politically stable environment have already attracted the attention of international investors, leading to a significant influx of FDI. Indeed, Botswana was and still is one of the most attractive investment destinations in Africa, based on a range of positive factors. However, in attracting FDI, particularly in the ICT sector, it is important to create a competitive environment such that local ICT providers can also win contracts, if only as subcontractors having the specialist knowledge, expertise, and skills, helping to sustain and grow the SME market. Smaller SMEs also need help bridging the funding gap faced by them in their support of a knowledge-based economy. Furthermore, it is important that foreign investors transfer some of their know-how to Botswana and the domestic labour force. This has sadly not happened sufficiently in the case of one major overseas investor in Africa. Certain skills are essential for a knowledge economy. Ideally, a multidisciplinary skill set is required, with a background in technology and an awareness of business and design. And ideally with some deep specialization, but of course, a specialization in its own right may one day become obsolete. Many of those Botswana will look to support its knowledge economy will come from its own universities and colleges. Like the UK, perhaps Botswana should, if it does not already, recognize that the heart of a knowledge economy and a civilized society is a strong academic system. This is essential to a country's economic success and the vibrancy and depth of its intellectual and cultural life. Universities need to demonstrate strengths in research and knowledge transfer, as well as student recruitment, growing long-term strategic partnerships in key countries like the UK. Back in 2010, Botswana had already invested heavily in its national fibre network and international connectivity, recognizing, and I quote, that information and knowledge constitutes a global public good and is essential to the advancement of education, science, culture, and communication, to empowerment, to the promotion of cultural diversity, and to fostering open governance. So how can Botswana advance its ICT connectivity? Well, it could provide tax incentives, create an enabling environment, remove entry barriers, encourage and facilitate competition, make ICT equipment and services more affordable, and think long-term. Further, it could ensure internet and mobile services were available in all areas and enhance public skills and knowledge on how to use them. Like the UK, continuous investment in innovation, enhanced skills amongst its workforce, and supporting the business environment will be key to consolidating and enhancing the competitiveness of the Botswana economy in key sectors and markets at home and overseas. Investment in intangible assets, such as research and development, software and skills in the financial services sector or in the business services sector, could also help Botswana maintain a comparative and competitive advantage in knowledge-intensive services. It could also help the country take advantage of new export market opportunities arising from the improvements in information and communication technology, which have taken place over the years, e.g. the emergence of digital technologies and superfast broadband, and increase export demand as a result of rising incomes in emerging economies. Again, in the UK, for example, at one point in time, a third of the output of knowledge service industries was used by other manufacturing or service sectors as inputs. ICT is one component, enabling some sectors to develop new higher value products and adopt more efficient methods of production. Sectors such as digital and creative industries and professional business services, R&D and ICT industries provide the necessary consultancy services needed by other sectors to design and deliver new products to their customers and solve the complex technical and logistical problems which may be hampering business competitiveness. One might want to look at the experience of Armenia. Some years back, it decided that ICT was considered a priority, approving a program for the development of an information and telecommunications industry in the country. This was based on an information and communications master strategy, which was developed with substantial technical assistance from both the World Bank and overseas aid experts. The focal point of that strategy was the establishment of a business incubator. The following two conditions were noted as being essential for the development of a successful ICT industry by Armenia: the retention of skilled human capital as the key to competitiveness, the provision of access to capital, and the market for emerging ICT business. To thrive, the knowledge economy relies on an adequate institutional framework, good education, strong communication infrastructure, and a supporting financial environment. In summary, and I quote from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, "It is knowledge that has become the engine of the social, economic, and cultural development in today's world." Thank you.
After the colleagues have also made the presentation on the same topic, I'd like to now introduce Mr. Gabet Isegole, who's the commercial executive at Bofinet. Resegole has an extensive executive experience in ICT. and has previously assumed the role of project management executive within Bofinet. That's the Botswana Fiber Network. Please do tell the colleagues what Bofinet does, who are in the virtual room, noting that some are not necessarily from Botswana. Resogole is in his current role, he oversees the development of product marketing and sales and corporate communication. Prior to joining Bofinet, he led technology teams at Botswana Telecommunication Corporation and Orange Botswana as Group General Manager for Technology and Chief Technology Officer, respectively. He is also married to Nompumelelo Segole, and they have been blessed with 2 daughters. Resegole, over to you.
It is but the evolution. It has its ups and downs. What matters is how soon we pop back up. There we go. One of those microphones is definitely live. I'm going to assume that it's Mamafa's microphone. Oh, thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, moderator, and good afternoon, my colleagues, the panelists sitting here, and good afternoon to everyone. My take on the topic, or rather what I'll be discussing before my colleagues come in, will primarily be speaking to infrastructure readiness within the country. How we enable the economy to compete in this in globalization 4.0. I think the main speaker did speak about the impact of 4.0, that it is essential to speak about ICT. And I believe that's why our colleagues are here today. But before I speak to the infrastructure, I think as an economy, as a country, there are a number of things we need to consider, and we're going to speak about them here. We have to recognize the challenges and opportunities that exist within that is brought about by the fourth industrial revolution. And in terms of those opportunities, we could be looking at how they can improve the quality of lives of ordinary people. Ordinary people, I'm speaking about myself, I'm speaking about you, I'm speaking about the farmer who's somewhere doing, doing what he needs to do to feed his children. We need to speak about the challenges that is being brought by this technology or globalization in terms of displacement of workers by machines. Or will they do that? That's the question that we need to answer when you speak of globalization and fourth industrial revolution. Let's look at the impact on the businesses, because your traditional business, like Cofinet, certainly the existing value chain will be disrupted somehow by the new technologies. So you really need to look into that as an organization and as an economy, because with fourth industrial revolution, it is imperative. It's imperative that is going to disrupt, and it's doing that as we speak. The other important factor we need to consider is the impact on the government, but I would like to speak about regulation. You can't, with this new technology, still use the old way that we have been used to in terms of regulation. Let me give an example. You have OTTs that are rampant now, your WhatsApp, your Facebook. They need no permission in Botswana to operate. Do they? No. But as we look forward as a country, and the entrepreneurs come up and decide to work on some application of some sort that will assist the people and the economy, the regulation and the laws should be able to enable them to prosper. You look at UPIC and Netflix. Netflix doesn't need to be regulated in Botswana. Now, if an entrepreneur decides to go into content distribution, you have to look into that and see how will they be able to be allowed or afford an opportunity to compete with the likes of Netflix without impeding them. Yes, there's that impact on the people, the privacy of the people once you go into fourth industrial revolution. Those are the issues that you need to speak to. Now, what needs to happen? From the infrastructure perspective, there has to be that close collaboration, close working together between the different players in the economy. We can speak from where I sit to say you need proper infrastructure, and that proper infrastructure, once you speak of fourth industrial revolution, you need appropriate infrastructure like your fiber. You need proper infrastructure, even if it's wireless. Go 5G, 4.5G, 5G. I'm happy because when you look at other service providers in the private industry, not necessarily both of them, they are doing their bit. You will hear them talk about their readiness in terms of the infrastructure and say they have 4.5G. What does that mean? Effectively, they are saying, should 5G come, we are ready to upgrade without major replacements. So that's the infrastructure part of it that the players in this space are doing. Property developers, there's a talk of smart cities. When you engage the likes of, Caesar, they consider smart city to be critical as well. And they engage the service providers, ICT service providers, to develop these smart cities. Whether it's Pandamatenga for the farmers, there will be need for that infrastructure. Whether it's the airport, special economic zone, there will be need for such infrastructure. Now, with the fourth industrial revolution, we're speaking huge data. We're speaking huge data. This is where now there is that opportunity for us as a nation to have data centers that are fit for purpose. Because of the volumes of the data that we have. You need the data center that is purpose-built for the big multinational organizations to be able to come to Botswana and say, we can put our infrastructure here because you have a proper data center. We need such data centers as an economy. Now, the main speaker obviously spoke of skills and education system, which is very important. My colleagues, and I've read the profiles of some of my colleagues here, they are from that space of they do computer science or IT, and that's my background as well. Now, I remember my time at university when I was doing programming. The languages that we're using, I don't think they are being used today. Your COBOL, your Fortran. Today, when you look at, machine learning, language that are being used, it's the likes of Java, Python, and so on and so forth. So in terms of the education, it's important, therefore, to look and see what is it that we need to do, what skills are there that needs to be nurtured and implemented in our universities. Now, obviously with this, you will be coming up with new workforce, not the likes of Sohole. The people who will be well trained from a young age to develop such applications. Young age. And we need to start at young age as an economy to be able to develop the skills. Last but very importantly, obviously the security. With all of these technologies, there needs to be security. And we probably need a state-of-the-art security operation centers to avert all the attacks that may be coming through into our country. I think that is key and very important. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Resegole. I would like to also invite our next speaker to give her reaction or her take on the subject or on the topic. She'll have 10 minutes. I just want to introduce her. Ms. Sekhameti Mafa, she's the founder and managing director of Service Excellence. And her passion for business for a business such as this comes from her vast experience of over 18 years of corporate growth and work as an IT professional. She has recently founded and is the managing director of an ICT consultancy business in the name of Service Excellence, and she has held several positions from government to parastatals, private companies, from technical level to senior management level. And she holds, amongst others, an MSc Strategic Management and a BSc Computer Science Management Development Program, Corbett and ITIL. Memafa.
Hello. Thank you, Ratsako. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you for hosting us Global Expo. Our topic has been introduced. We want to develop Botswana. We want to grow our businesses. We want to grow ourselves. And as we plan to grow ourselves, I've just been introduced as a new entrant into the service industry. And what I'm looking at is globalization is fast destroying our traditional borders. Globalization is fast destroying the norms that we are used to, the policies that we've lived by, and to a large extent, the governance structures that we've set for ourselves, that we have been so comfortably holding dearly to ourselves. This in turn has a very large bearing on the economy that we have set for ourselves as a country. And through observance of effective and efficient delivery of products and services, observing international standards in all sorts, be it on quality, on manufacturing, on safety, we cannot continue the same. We need to change. How we do all this is no longer known to us alone. How we deliver service and how we develop products is no longer our own baby, but it's a global product that we are giving out. We are giving birth to a baby that will be known all over the world. So it is on this background that as a country, we need to look within ourselves and leverage on what we have to be less dependent and become more self-sufficient. What we already have is the skill. What we already have is the technical know-how, and we need to use that to grow our businesses, to be able to compete effectively across all borders. COVID-19 on its own has come up with a lot of negative impact, has brought the world to a common ground of reflection and introspection. This year alone, we all dropped to the same level. I believe we agree. We all dropped to the same level of operation. We saw businesses closing down. We saw businesses pausing operations. We saw some businesses opening small doors. We also saw governments doing the same. It was not only happening in the private sector, and it was not happening only to a specific field of operation. We saw it happening across all angles, from manufacturing industries to mining industries, to hospitals, to schools, to restaurants, to retail stores. We have all been affected. But how we rise is determined by what we have. How we rise is determined by what we know. My colleague just spoke to infrastructure. The infrastructure that we have will determine how we rise up. It will determine how we move forward. It will determine how we compete and place ourselves in the world to be able to compete effectively. It is on this backdrop again that we need to leverage on the competitive and comparative advantages that we have as a country. We have always been known as Botswana to be a very peaceful country, to be harmless, to be full of expression, to be free, to have all sorts of freedoms, be it freedom of speech, freedom of education, access to land, and a lot of amenities. We have rich natural resources. We have been safely secured for a very long time as a country. But can we package all this into saleable knowledge that can turn our economy into something that is worth looking up to and saying, indeed, as a country, we are moving towards an export-led economy? Can we package all that we have been known to be? When we look again at the pandemic, what it has done to us, it has turned us to look at ourselves and introspect a lot. If you look around ourselves within Botswana, we have been able to turn our yards into bakeries. We've turned our yards into gardens. We've turned our yards into farms. We've turned our yards into production studios. The artists that we have today have been able to do a lot behind their houses. We've developed applications, we've developed businesses, we have learned to buy and sell online. We developed good habits. We have started reading, we have started learning online. Some people have turned into authors. We have books that have been produced in the last 3 to 6 months. We have new writers that we can leverage on. We have gone viral on social media as a country and as Botswana. Our local TV started airing our local production of COVID-19 updates throughout the day and night, and add on to those who are in the TV and film production to say, here we are. What can we do to also be known and produce those artistic events that can be aired in our local medias? The only common thing that also brought us together as a country has been data and Wi-Fi. I believe we can all agree that without data, without Wi-Fi, it was going to be way, way difficult for us to have survived. But we were put in that corner where, as a country, we needed to expedite some of the projects. Where, as a country, we have shown that we can do it. Where, as a country, we have shown that with speed and when put in a tight corner, we can do it. We celebrate the B2B project, bringing our fiber to the homes, and we can all tell that we needed to expedite that because we had a lot of people now working from home. And working from home was not easy with the Wi-Fi that we have. We needed to increase our bandwidth, most of us. So that on its own created business for some, while for some, it was negatively impacting on their finances. But all things good and bad, we have been able to rise. We can look back today and say, how do we move forward? How do we harness all that we have started with? As Botswana, we are not lazy. I've seen it through social media. I've seen it through my interactions that we can come out and be creative. We can do a lot. The only worry that remains is that what are we going to do when borders are opening? What are we going to do with all that we had started? The good gardens that we had started at home. We no longer used to worry about going to buy vegetables in the shops because we had our own vegetables in our backyards. But today, how many of us have sustained that? When shops opened, when lockdown was uplifted, what did we do with all that? I think we have gone a long way in developing our technical skills. We have so many good technical skills, thanks to our government who offered free training. We are also thankful and grateful to all those educators who were able, throughout this lockdown, to create online learning platforms for free. We had entrepreneurial courses that were going on. We have non-technical skills that were going on, and it is upon us to take advantage and use those. I was introduced as somebody who has worked across, I think, all sectors, and my 18 years of experience as an ICT professional, I have worked with a number of contractors, in my environment. I've worked in a lot of projects in my environment. I have delivered most of the work and projects in my environment. I have created business relationships in my environment. And trust me, most of this is not founded on the technical skills that we all have, but it is founded on the non-technical skills, the soft skills that we have. And therefore, as a country, we can work hard to leverage on the soft skills that we have to deliver excellent service to all the clients and customers that we have. So I want to implore it upon us that even as we continue in these deliberations, let us remember that we can do so much in acquiring technical skills, but we can also do so much in acquiring the non-technical skills to be able to compete globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serameti. Our last speaker, just before we get into a discussion, is Mr. Kenneth Sitimela. He's the founder and managing director of Leverage Point. Kenneth Mutsidi Sitimela is the founder and managing director of Leverage Point. It's an innovative software development company based in Botswana that thrives in the development of custom-made software solutions. Kenneth has an extensive corporate and regional experience in the ICT space, having served at Local Enterprise Authority, SADC Secretariat for 13 years combined. He has participated in the delivery of many ICT-related projects in the SADC region, including health, democracy, elections, infrastructure, education, amongst others. Kenneth's company, Leverage Point, has recently launched an ERP solution that is geared towards digitally transforming SMMEs in Botswana and the SADC region, this being the first of its kind in the country. The solution continues to receive awards locally and regionally. Further to this, Leverage Point has secured partnerships with banks in Malawi, and Kenneth is an alumni of Stellenbosch University in South Africa, holds an MPhil in Information Knowledge Management, and he holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Botswana. He's a Prince 2 practitioner, and he has used his wealth of project management in delivering projects across many industries. Ken?
Thank you, Tsepo, for the auspicious introduction. The general problem of being the last speaker in a panel is you run the risk of sounding like a broken record in terms of repeating what everybody has already said. I will try to flip my script to sort of be the one who's doing that sort of overview of what pretty much everybody has said by taking us a little back to the general understanding of what the knowledge economy is about and trying to tie it to everything that everybody has talked about. We will also try to touch on the low-hanging fruits, particularly the short-term and possibly what would be interesting in the long term in terms of us being indeed a knowledge economy. Generally, as a principle, these two words, knowledge and economy, speak to two different things. Human beings have always had knowledge, but when we come into globalization or the fourth industrial revolution, we are talking about embedded knowledge that has been translated from human beings into the many systems through programming, through coding, through having typically a JCB. MC, please pardon me, my mask keeps interrupting me.
human beings have always had knowledge. And over the continuum and space of existence of human beings, they've continued to translate it to a level where we are now talking robotics. We are not there as a country. It is my hope that one day we will jump into the continuum and become part of that conversation in that realm. The second part that has always been important in this space is energy. Back in the first industrial revolution, this energy came from human beings. We embedded it in machines, and the robots came into the space and the tools. So when we are talking about a functioning economy against these two principles of knowledge economy, it is that combination of those three, and the advent, the availability, and the platforms that came with the internet, the ERPs, are the ones that forced the economy to go into the fourth major change. So these changes have been happening all along. And we are cognizant of this major change that we are now talking to as the fourth major change. Out of that fourth major change, it was possible because of the infrastructure, it was possible because of the people, and it was possible because of an enabling legislature. So when we have to measure ourselves as a country in respect to the ethos and the ability to transition from an industrial-based economy to the fourth industrial, it's against those three major components. But beyond that, there's a bit of a mix that comes not only from people being the ones that used to channel energy, and now that energy being channeled now by the embedded knowledge through robots, the cultural twist. And that cultural twist is possibly our unique selling point as a country. What is it that we have as a country that could invigorate and put a lot of energy and drive a lot of new initiatives that could potentially result in us offering something that is new to the world? If we are to sell something that is different to the world, it means that it has to have a little bit of uniqueness in the way we are packaging it, a little bit of uniqueness in the way that the world is sort of viewing it. And we do have those many unique things that speak to us and our context. The soft issues, our core engraved belief around sharing, which is precisely how we saw the development of our country to transition from one of the poorest countries in the world to one of the fastest growing economies for 2 centuries. What does this mean? We shared the diamonds that were mined back in Orapa, in Jwaneng, in Letlhakane, are the reason why we were able to take such and make those investments. What does the sharing mean in as far as us coming into the knowledge economy? It means that the many government programs that already exist need to find that which is unique. That is one. 2, what does legislator assist us with in as far as not only allowing us to go out there, but also attracting foreign direct investment in terms of the investors? Thirdly, what I think is also important to think about in this whole twist is immigration policies. The world is flat, and some of the best and brilliant countries in as far as innovation are concerned continue to have brain exchange. So from an immigration point of view, what is it that we can do as a country to facilitate that level of exchange? And do remember, a lot of our progress, probably looking back 10 years ago, was possible because a lot of people had gone abroad to study, and they brought that knowledge and infused it with our culture and assisted in terms of the development of the country. How can we continue to do that? I am ambitious to think that why are we not sending 2025 of some of the brilliant young kids to go and study space engineering, to subsequently come back into the country? Because at one point we will want to launch satellites, and issues of security and other facets will be part of that dialogue. I just wanted to bring in that bit of twist and everything to the conversation.
No, thank you so much. I'm looking at the time, and I stand to be guided. I see we have 25 minutes to engage. I think being that I'm the moderator, I'll start. And then I do encourage, I don't know if we have a way of taking questions from the virtual room and interacting, but for those in this room, I will be inviting you shortly to also pose questions to the esteemed panel. Maybe waiting for guidance here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tseko. Just to inform you, I think from what I noticed in the first session, any questions from our virtual audience will pop up on the big screen. Until then, I'm sure that the delegates that have made it to this afternoon session would love to throw in their 50 tables worth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So I think, and thank you very much, dear esteemed panelists. I think it's very clear, and I was looking for contradiction in what you're saying, each of you, and I think there's a consensus, but where I now just need a simpler response to the question, and simpler because it's easier to do something when it's very clear how, and how to do it, what goes when, and what comes after what. So I will start with Keith, and then I'm going to bring it here. Keith, from an external perspective, the ingredients are available, but it's maybe a bit challenging, for me sitting here, and I don't know if the other colleagues are not as challenged, but just to get the cookbook. What is the recipe that Botswana needs to get right? So what needs to happen first, second, and third? From your point of view, as someone from the outside looking at us, with our aspirations of becoming a knowledge and an export-led economy, because trying to do too many things and not maybe sequencing them properly might be more a disaster than it is a good thing. So I'll ask you this question, and then the other colleagues, I'd also like in three things that we need to sequence, and I'll be looking for consensus, and I know you haven't spoken, so I just want to make sure if the recommendations or the ideas we're throwing are able to take us somewhere beyond this conversation. So Keith, over to you.
Can you now hear me? I'm just checking you can hear me first.
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Well, I think for me, and this applies actually to any country in the same way it applies to the UK and any country really, it really needs to be government-led, whatever happens in a country. Having said that, to a large extent or some extent, the banks and the major conglomerate companies control a lot what happens in any country, including the UK. But government does have a place. And I think any strategy, and it needs a strategy, has to be government-led. Government has to decide what it wants to achieve as well, particularly with inviting in foreign direct investment and private investment, what it wants out of that. And a colleague spoke earlier about addressing issues of poverty and helping the general population. Most companies, certainly in developed countries, of course, and investors are looking for a profit motive and the ability to repatriate that profit back to their home country. So for me, I think the government needs to come up with a strategy, with a plan. It needs to put in place the appropriate infrastructures and the institutions as well, which will assist those who wish to come and invest in Botswana in this case. It needs to work alongside those investors as partners. It needs to decide to what extent it wants a public and private partnership, or whether it wants alone a private situation without putting any government money into it itself. It needs to also have a long-term strategy where it's going and put in place whatever it can to assist private investors investing in a country. For me also, it needs to very much concentrate and engage with its, I think Botswana's got one university, to really engage with the university and influence its educational, its higher educational requirements, so that people, that university students in particular, have the education and knowledge, economy education needed, and also find some way of retaining them. Sadly, it happens in the UK as well. We educate students to a very high level, but they go and work overseas, but that works both ways round. And nobody seems to have found a way to solve that yet. So for me, it needs a long-term strategy. The state can be a big driver of the knowledge economy. It can indeed create a knowledge economy with its own institutions. It needs to collaborate internationally. It needs to collaborate with its own partners. And I think beyond that, there is a much more detailed, wider discussion. But for me, it's creating the climate to encourage, say, foreign direct investment and business to come into the country. And indeed, I think Botswana is already a good example of doing the right thing in this area, and indeed generally. And for me, I have amazing praise for Botswana. Certainly back in the UK, sadly, there is a perception about Africa generally, in some ways, some negative aspects, which there are certain countries in Africa which don't help in that respect. But you know, I certainly think in the UK and also the diaspora, the Botswana diaspora overseas can be helping more to promote Botswana, indeed to the point of actually engaging with overseas investors and institutions here in the UK to come and invest in Botswana. So I'm very supportive of what Botswana is aiming to achieve. And I say there's a few things I mentioned which may help.
Very much, Keith. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll just ask Mamafa to respond to the same question, but just to confirm or challenge whether the top 3 things that we need to do as a country in order to progress, obviously, because I think the quote was, like it or not, a new world is upon us. So it's happening whether we're ready for it or not. I just, please do touch on all aspects, whether it's infrastructure related or the innovation side. But I just need a position of whether from the private sector in Botswana, because Keith mentions that government has to take the lead, but having worked for private sector and some of the largest corporates in Botswana, what is your take? What 3 things must we do? And how are those 3 things to be ordered for us to move forward?
Thank you. I think at the core of everything, amongst the 3 that you're asking me to talk to, I would say corporate governance is key. We need governance structures that will help us progress the strategies that we set for ourselves. The second one I would say is project management. We need to have independent project management offices that are able to drive the projects that we have. I think as a country, we have too many projects that are falling behind time, that are falling behind budget, that we keep changing the scope. There's a lot of scope creep as we continue, and therefore we never or hardly complete anything as planned. So I think project management is very key. And then I also would want to say, maybe also coming from a private parastatal sector, most of the projects and most of the operations that we run are done by contractors who are technically skilled in their various jobs. And as technically skilled guys, we need to manage them, because delivery of the services that we procure from them can only be successful if we manage the contracts that we set for ourselves. We need to define what we want in terms of the contract, and we need to manage performance of the contractors. I think as a country, we are good at managing performance of the employees that we recruit, but we don't manage performance of the contractors that we bring on board to supplement or complement the skills and the knowledge that we have within the organization. So it's high time we prioritize those.
Thank you very much. My last question before I take questions from the audience, to the gentleman on my right. I think a lot has been mentioned around skills. The skills that we need, both technical and otherwise, hard and soft. Do we have the requisite skills to usher our country towards a knowledge economy? And if not, again, in not so many words, because we don't have too much time, what must be done right now, next, and thereafter? I'll start with yourself, Kenneth.
I think just to try to hit the nail on the mark, we must appreciate that the knowledge economy is very experimental in its nature and very expensive, particularly from an innovation point of view. There are a lot of government programs that already exist. I think we need to sort of see the transition from your youth development fund, from moving away from funding the old traditional sectors, but more sectors that are knowledge oriented, because then there would be that lot of experimentation. Two, at government level, I think budget needs to transition from brick and mortar development, but more to the knowledge economy. And there's so many facets to that. Just this morning, the Excellency was outlining that we have 10,000 plus kilometers throughout the country of fiber. And you will agree with me that that means we have surpassed the physical roads. So it means that development is now on the digital highways. So what is it that needs to be done for us to make sure that everybody consumes this? Again, from a financial point of view, I hope at one point the financial learned people will unpack all of this in terms of how do we use generally the funds that exist to try to put in a bit of energy into the sector itself. Majority of the times, majority of the fund managers are inclined to be making investments in property, in many other sectors. BPOPF, one of the biggest funds. What is it that it's doing to contribute directly to the knowledge economy?
Rasekgole, I think for me, because this is my last question, I just need to rehash. Everyone is talking infrastructure, the importance of infrastructure as a bedrock to support our transition towards a knowledge-led economy. Uh, w- what is working? Is everyone online? If not, what needs to be done? And what timelines should we set for ourselves to ensure that everyone can participate meaningfully towards the knowledge-led economy from your side?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tsepo. Let me just comment on the first question you asked Keith and pick on what he said on education. It is imperative that we have proper skills. He mentioned universities or tertiary institutions, but my take is it has to start at a much younger age. You don't want the people that will be coding for you for the sensitive services to start learning coding or programming at the university level. That's our time. We have gone past that. So at the moment, a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old should start coding now. There are applications that can assist them to start learning to code. I mean, they can play with robotic stuff. For them, that is to start to get their minds to be in a position to be able to code in the future. In terms of the question you asked me, I think there's progress we made as a country. When you talk of globalization, let's look at what the government did some years back in 2008 and prior. They ensured that the country is connected to the rest of the world, through London with the easy and the wax cable, east and west. That's the thinking on globalization, where they appreciated that we need to be engaging or communicating with the outside world. What else has happened nationally? We are, as a country, connected to all our neighbors. Yes, South Africa, there is more emphasis on South Africa because of the economy that South Africa is. 70% of internet traffic goes to South Africa. Why? Because they've got huge data centers there, purpose-built data centers, and you have your big multinational corporations sitting in South Africa. So that's why you realize that as a country, we do have multiple connections with South Africa, through the two borders we have, Ramatabama, Pioneer, Tokweng, and then there are other ways to ensure that if there are any disruptions, you could go through Namibia and into South Africa, or through Zimbabwe and into South Africa. So those are the initiatives that we have done, the government has actually done. Because you don't want a situation where the country is blackout in the country. You can't communicate with the outside world. That was the emphasis. Yes, not everybody's connected. There are about 193 villages. Let's not only look in Gaborone and the cities. There are about 193 villages that do not have communications at all. And that needs to be addressed. I know if it wasn't for the challenges of COVID, there have been plans by the government to ensure that those villages are also covered. But as Mafa said, COVID did bring something, or rather they did expose and say, look, you're not quite ready to deal with what is happening now. And there was that fast track in terms of fiber to the homes. And the private sector, they're also playing their part, because you see a number of wireless radios that they used to connect homes. And where there's fiber, that's when they do the migrations. So yes, there is still a long way to go, but absolutely there is some progress that we can talk about and be proud of.
No, thank you very much. Sorry about that. We have time for just 2 questions from the audience. I don't know if the physical audience would like to ask any question of the panelists. You can raise your hand if you have a question. Okay. Oh, okay, there's a hand back there. Please do ask your question. If it's directed, you can let us know to whom it's directed, and then they'll answer. Okay. Okay, I don't know if Keith, that question was for you. I don't know if you heard it.
I wasn't able to hear the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, Scott, just remove your mask and elevate, but briefly, just ask the question so that we don't have much time.
Don't mean to interject, gentlemen, but just for the purposes of audibility, I don't know if maybe sound team might have an additional roving mic to give to the gentleman so that Keith can hear him and be able to give him a sound response to his question. Tota nna nkgonne ke ka pele o bua gore ka ko India ke bone ba ba strong thata ka development ka gona bo developer ke utlwa o bua ka di-pig farm ka kgabodisa o bua gore re tla kgona jang gore ba rona di-developera le bone ba bonale mo spacing mme ke tla kopa kgaitsedi ka o e tlhamaletse ka botswerere jwa gago. Thank you, team.
Thank you. I was saying, how do we get local companies and parastatals and government agencies to leverage local developers and ICT companies for their research and development projects?
Thank you, sir.
Keith, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I heard the question. I'm not sure I'm going to be the best person to answer this. How do we, I think the question is, how do we enable local companies and others to influence, is it leverage projects or government? Have I got that correct?
Keith, the question is, how do you get local companies, big companies, so parastatal, so quasi-government companies, as well as corporates, including government, how do you foster them to engage developers to work on their R&D projects? So how do you enable that?
Ideally, I think in the UK in particular, certainly in the UK, there is a government body which exists to actually work with R&D developers and other knowledge-based areas and be a go-between between them and indeed companies. So I think the government needs to set up some sort of, and there's lots of them in the UK, various boards or bodies which are actually either funded, and I know one recently had its funding increase from about 185 million to 500 million, and that particular body is there to work as a go-between between those who want to invest, want to develop, want to progress in the knowledge economy, and wanting to find the private sector or the investor and the outlets to achieve that. So I think it's a case of establishing go-between facilitators, and the government need to do this, or indeed organisations like Chambers of Commerce, or in the UK, the CBI, Confederation of British Industries, and other bodies like that should be the go-between to achieve that. Certainly, again in the UK, I'm based in Birmingham, second city, and I know there that lots of bodies engage with the City Council, the West Midlands Council, and indeed government, and it works its way up. And that partnership and engagement, and that has to be facilitated in order to achieve the outcomes and have good arguments, well-based arguments, which are based on a good return on investment, that it makes sense to do it.
Thank you very much. I don't know, it's actually 4 o'clock and 4:01. I don't know if we can just check if there are no questions, because it's not often you're able to get a panel like this that has not only the experience, but has ideas that we can embrace to realize our aspirations. So may I be indulged?
You are indulged, sir.
Thank you so much. So can I invite the last question? And it can be a difficult question if possible for the colleagues here. Last question. Going once, twice. Okay, I'll take it.
Was that a hand raised there by the sound booth? Oh,
There's
okay.
there's a question. No.
False alarm.
Please. Is there a question there?
Sounds like he's changed his mind. The gentleman has changed his mind.
Oh, okay. I think the very last question that I would like to pose, I think it will go to, it really builds on the question that Keith was asked. What is working in Botswana to foster, obviously the talent? Because I think everyone was talking about, if I listened and I heard carefully, that SMEs need to scale and they need to be facilitated. So I just need from Kenneth an innovator's experience with what's working and be very practical, what's working, and what do we need to build on? I think we've talked a lot about what isn't working. So as a way forward, please close the panel for us with that insight.
Ke tla kopela rre wa panel ya rona a se ka lentswe se mo tseleng le ska la tshwenyega re Segole ba tla motlala wa gagwe.
Thank you for the question, Ratsako. Couple of things are obviously working. And just to touch a little bit on what he was asking, in order for us to be seen as the best in terms of what we do, we really have to put all our heart and soul into it. And India has practically done that on the entire value chain of the innovation space. Hence why that click farms, those that specialize in a particular part. So equally, as innovators and players in the market, we need to sharpen our skills and do that. It takes time. That's the first part. Touching again on the cultural component and understanding of the environment that we are working under was part of the reason why Leverage Point went out and developed a software solution that is aimed at small businesses in Botswana. The purpose of which was to digitally transform them. So we need to have some sort of sectoral focus as innovators and say, come rain or sunshine, after all the many experimentations, we need to say, this is what we want to focus on. And when we are able to focus, we will be able to go all out in terms of ensuring that we compete with the world. Some of our products have seen that sort of international acceptance because after so many iterations of trying them out, some failed, we packed them and we said, what is it that we've learned? For startup companies, that comes at a huge cost. And that basically means that sometimes you are up, sometimes you are down, and sometimes you crash. So it's that sort of, it's on that sort of basis, that's why it's important to advocate for research funding. Because almost all the government programs are trying to provide that which is taken to a commercial, but not grassroots development of this innovation. I'm kind of taking advantage of the fact that we still have a bit of time just to energize the conversation a little bit. Over and above all of this, government has done an exceptional job. And that exceptional job is on the basis of, again, our ethos of sharing and boto, where we are taking the little that we are having and spreading it across the entire country as an enabler for everybody to now come and participate. Yes, there is a bit of digital divide here and there, but what it means, again, it's the focus of what sort of playing role do I want to focus on? The truth of the matter is that we are more of innovation consumers when we look at everything that we have within the country. So we need to transition from being way back there and jumping in. We can't transition and move in stages. We need to jump in. How do we jump in? One day soon, we will want to be amongst those who have launched satellites. How are we going to make sure that those that are going to be taking care of our satellites against issues of information security, corporate espionage, how do we make sure it's us, our own? How do we plan for the future such that when we do that, it is us in the helm of such? There've been so many conversations around this. Tsepo, I fully believe that we are capable of becoming part of the knowledge economy. We need to make that jump, and it is quite refreshing that as the mandate of government, we continue to be making so many transitions around this. I totally believe that we will be part of the knowledge economy. Thank you.
Hey, topic e bula tlhaloganyo le leruri. Re wa rona wa Bohelo, o tswa go bua gore most of us are consumers of innovation. I'll stand up and say guilty as charged indeed. I use it and understand it less, and it was quite enlightening to join a discussion by those who are very astute and eloquent in developing it, making it, regulating it, and indeed monetizing it. Let's give a round of applause to the last moderator standing on this first day, Mr. Tsepo Tseko, our Director of ICT and Marketing at Botswana Innovation Hub. Ra go leboga kgaitsedi ya rona, gore o bo o e tshwere ka thata, wa ba wa e wetsa to the last moment. I do believe that our Chief Operating Officer, Reginald, who has been here since way earlier than 6 a.m., I believe, is still standing because he insisted on presenting tokens of appreciation to yourself, Tsepo, as well as your incredible panel. Re Keith Stokes-Smith, thank you so much for joining us, sir. As I've been saying to all of our virtual guests, I'm going to take it as a reliable statement to say that we will hold on to your gift until such a time that the dust settles and you're able to physically travel this side just to collect it. Thank you for your time, sir. Well, our Chief Operating Officer and his delegation are now coming to the stage to present tokens of appreciation to Tsepo Tseko, Mr. Kiabetse Segole, Sekametsi Mafa, as well as Kenneth Sitimela. Re le leboga thata lotlhe go menagane. Ke sologela le tla ditlhela di comments tsa di innovators tsa banana ba rona ba ba di tlhaloganyang thata go heta mosadimogolo ga maikeng mo motsotsong ono wa gompieno. Ke a le leboga betso. Well, as you witness the presentation of gifts, tokens of appreciation, if you will, allow me to inform you that each of the items in these gift bags is strictly and proudly Pusha BW. That is to say,